do is run.
Come on, focus.
Hey everyone, it's Jinx, I'm a Genshin Impact math guy now. Sorry for the long wait on this video. I have been no live testing on Ganyu, discussing with theory crafters, and also just trying to cut down the original 14-page script for this video. Huge thanks to my channel partner Tuner, who did help trim down the script to a much more reasonable size. Remember, he does stream almost every single day over at twitch.tv/tuner. We are business partners, so any follows, Twitch primes, and subs do help us both out quite a bit. So at this point, we're committing to a full video series on Ganyu. There is simply a lot to talk about with the Coco Goat. In this video, I want to cover the raw basics of Ganyu and why you should or should not pull for her, or the in-depth analysis on the math, deep dive explanations of her nuanced mechanics, and all that kind of stuff will be in future vids. Alright, let's jump right in and start with the most important statement of this video. So just to get it out of the way, Ganyu is a carry, not a support. As always, it's a game, have fun and play how you want. But in terms of Ganyu's power budget and power level, her carry power potential is much higher than anything else we've seen in Genshin so far. She is the new strongest carry in Genshin with caveats. To be clear, Tuner and I don't consider this quote-unquote power creep because that suggests she invalidates the other options. And she doesn't. You can still 9-star all of the Abyss with Diluc, Ningguang, Klee, etc. And Ganyu is arguably the cheapest way to do so, more on that later, but she does not make other carries irrelevant. But all of these statements are for her carry power. Her support power is good, but arguably not top tier. The various theory crafters I've discussed with in Kaching mains, in Child mains, and yes, in Ganyu mains all seem to agree that she is not really worth pulling for if you only want to use her as a support. She can support, and she is pretty good at it, but she's only situationally more useful as a cryo support than Kaya or Diona, and Kaya's free and Diona's a 4-star. As a cryo enabler, she's simply not always going to be better than these other options. While she is a better superconduct support than Kaya due to a higher duration on her ult, for superconduct she's at best on par with Diona, but Diona also consolidates being the healer in your team, and we only get one Bennett in the Abyss. Outside of being a superconduct enabling support, she generally just has lower cryo application than Kaya does. This is partly due to Kaya's E being a shorter cooldown and also having a strong cryo strength gauge so it can trigger more/longer reactions, and it generates more energy than Ganyu so he can self-fund his ult better as an enabler. But the biggest reason is because of how Ganyu's ult works. So I'll be diving deep into all the testing on Ganyu's ult in a different video because I could literally spend 10 minutes discussing all of the nuances, but here's the basics. So first off, her ult does drop 50 icicles during its 15 seconds, so that's 1 per 0.3 seconds. These all have AoE and can hit nearby targets. At max, every target can only get a single targeted icicle assigned once every 5 icicles dropped, in other words once every 1.5 seconds, and in large enough groups this has been observed to go up to 1.8 seconds. Any non-targeted icicles will just drop randomly within the circle, which can hit enemies randomly. So on any non-grouped up single targets, you can expect 10 icicles to hit a target, which is lower single target DPS than Kaya's ult, albeit only by a small amount when we're talking about full builds. However, you can potentially double, triple, or even quadruple the DPS of this ult on each target by grouping up enemies. However, this does require keeping them grouped up. If you keep 2 enemies grouped for all 15 seconds, yes, they each take twice the expected DPS. But if you can only manage to keep them grouped up for 5 seconds, they only take 33% more DPS each. But we'll discuss Venti later in the video. Now, please keep in mind, even though it has been a week, it is still early. This is our best understanding of how her ult functions right now, but her ult is just frankly weird in its mechanics, and we are still testing. There's also the bigger issue that the endgame in Genshin currently is mostly 1 to 3 target focus so far, and if this trend continues, she won't necessarily outdo any of the top burst support options. She does decimate floor 11 of the Abyss though, not only because it's high enemy counts, but because of the cryo bonus she gets. It's just ridiculous how much damage she does there. Also, her cryo application is not all that amazing. Again, deep dive in a later video, but here's the TLDR based on the current testing. So due to its mechanics and internal cooldown on her ult, you are only guaranteed to apply cryo once every 3 seconds to a single target. This is twice as slow as Kaya's ult. If you get lucky, rando icicles can apply it a bit faster, but it's not reliable. In large clustered groups, the internal cooldown still caps out at around 1.5 seconds. Kinda, it's complicated and hard to explain in a short video, but the point is it's around on par with Kaya's ult as a cryo enabler. And no, neither Kaya or Ganyu's ult can act as a solid melt enabler for Klee or Diluc. You may be able to melt a few of the initial hits, but neither can really keep up. This ends up being true both in single and multi-target, and on top of that, even having Ganyu and Kaya's ult active at the same time isn't enough to keep up with Klee or Diluc. She's not even guaranteed to be a good melt enabler for a carry Bennett because she can't always keep up with his pyro application every 2 seconds. Now, it's not a bad thing to melt Ganyu's damage, but the point is that you're melting Ganyu, not your pyro carry. Again, though, we'll be talking about this more in depth in the future video about her support issues and niches. Now, don't get it twisted, I'm not saying Ganyu is a bad support. She has niches where she shines if you already have a Ganyu that is invested. However, if you're only pulling for her and only investing in her as a support, I don't think that's worth it. So let's instead talk about what Ganyu does excel in then, which is being a charge attack carry. Basically, Ganyu is a base DPS machine with reaction capabilities as a cryo damage unit. Her level 2 charge attack is a dump truck of base damage, and over 60% of the damage is a very large AoE. Now, it is important to note that headshots are guaranteed crits for the first hit of her charge attack, but not for the large AoE bloom that comes afterwards. So Ganyu still does want crit rate in her build. Fortunately, her Ascension 1 passive does add an extra 20 crit rate to her subsequent charge shots, so she does have lower crit rate needs than other units. Her charge attacks can be animation cancelled to be even faster, but even without animation cancels, just pressing the fire button at the right time in aim mode is about 2.2 to 2.3 seconds per level 2 charge shot. Even with this lower fire rate, this puts her charge shot's base motion value per second at around the same level at talent 6 as Diluc's normal attack and E-weave combo, which is the gold standard of repeatable carry DPS. However, Diluc's weave combo has a cooldown and Ganyu's charge attacks don't. Additionally, you can freeze or melt all of the damage in this charge attack for their respective bonuses. Ganyu can potentially melt all of her charge attack damage, more on that later. However, Diluc's converted normal attacks after his ult do have an internal cooldown on pyro application, meaning they have a cooldown on how often they can vape, so he only really gets to vape 4 to 5 hits of his 7-hit weave combo, which puts Ganyu's charge attacks even further ahead if we include these kinds of reactions. However, while this theoretical damage ceiling is high, there are caveats on how practical it is to actually tap into in real combat. We'll discuss these nuances when we get into talking about her playstyles and compositions, but before that, there is a very important thing I want to cover about Ganyu, which is that Ganyu is very worth hyper-investing in. Her insane solo DPS ceiling is part of the reason why I consider her one of the only units in the game worth hyper-investing in. Taking Ganyu to plus 20 artifacts, talent level 8 or 10 at Ascension 5 or 6 is simply put a lot more worth it on Ganyu than most other units in the game. This is because she has the highest raw base DPS for a carry in the game solo and in AoE. She also has the highest base attack scaling in the game along with Diluc, an amazing crit damage Ascension stat, and good talent scaling past talent 6. Her playstyle also rewards selfish teams, but unlike Razor and Klee, she doesn't have to be selfish, but she's very good at it because of how stacked her charge attack DPS is. As a case in point, Ariel over Kaching mains and Ganyu mains did an experiment on a hyper-invested Ganyu with 0 investment free-to-play supports and was able to clear 12-3 first half in under the 1 minute 30 you want for a 9-star clear. As always, link to the video is in the description. Now, this is with a free-to-play prototype Crescent at level 90 out of 90, pure free-to-play supports with no investment, and a plus 20 proper main stat Cryo 4 set bonus with decent but not fantastic substats. It is important to note that Ariel does have Constellation 1 and like me wishes that they could disable it to test without it. Ganyu's Cons 1 is a fantastic Cons 1 and arguably one of the best in the game next to Bennett's. However, in order to simulate not having the energy generation from having C1, Ariel only altered 3 times during the entire run. Ariel also wastes time on Kaya randomly throughout the run to try to simulate what it's like when you have to use Kaya to battery Ganyu because you don't have C1. Additionally, the run was not close close to perfect, and so more time shaving is possible. So while the Constellation 1 Resistance Shred definitely helped out Ganyu's damage output, we're still confident in saying that a C0 could achieve as fast or a faster time than this. And of course, with support investment or just better not free-to-play units, this team gets even stronger and faster. Aerial also doesn't pick up any Abyss cards, so this is a completely naked run in terms of Abyss buffs. Now, this is an incredibly important thing, because Ganyu's individual power is so high that she breaks our previous investment recommendations. Prior to Ganyu, other than Venti, there really wasn't a unit worth hyper-investing in versus spreading investment in your team instead. And hyper-investing in the Ganyu is cheaper than full Ascension 4-ing and plus 16-ing a full team, so this is technically the best cheap deeps comp possible in the game. That being said, both Ariel and I agree that no unit is worth taking to level 90. Level 90 is less than a 5% damage increase over level 80 out of 90 and costs almost the same experience to reach as a fresh level 80 unit from level 1. Put that resin investment into other units or better artifacts. It's not worth it unless you just really want to simp on Ganyu. However, I do feel it's really important to point out that Ganyu being the strongest carry and being the best unit to hyper-invest in is true right now. But remember that no unit is future-proof. We don't know if future 5-stars coming out may take her place as the best hyper-invested carry. Alright, one last thing before we talk playstyles and compositions, Ganyu's weapons. Another big thing that Ganyu has in her favor is that she's the best top carry in the game at using free-to-play weapons. Prototype Crescent is craftable and her best 4-star weapon, and it's really not that far behind her 5-star options. Black Cliff is also a good option you can buy from the Star Glitter shop, but it tends to underperform slightly versus Crescent with its passive up, but it doesn't require you to ever have the headshot. They are very close, so which one is better does depend on your starting stats to some degree, as well as your team compositions, like whether you have a Bennett or not. So I just recommend punching your Ganyu and her set into a calculator to see which one is better for you. The Kaching Main's library in the description has links to several good ones. And for 5-star weapons, Amos Bow is tailor-made for Ganyu. Now, it is important to note that in English, the Amos passive is worded weird. Basically, the way it works is that Amos adds more damage to normal or charge attacks the longer it takes to hit the enemy after firing. At Refinement 1, this is 8% per 0.1 seconds from firing to hitting the enemy. The thing is, the 0.3 second delay on the bloom from Ganyu's charge attacks count for this. This means even at point blank, heretofore known as Shotganyu range, Amos is adding at minimum 36% more additive damage bonus to the bloom, which is a lot, and 12% more damage to the first hit. And yes, this goes up the further away from the target you are. Now, if you want to run Ganyu as a burst damage support, Harp is better for her Q and E damage than Amos, and Stringless is better than other 4-stars for this. However, Harp will still beat Stringless unless you have very high refinements on your Stringless, but this depends a lot on your starting stats. Just go punch it into a calculator. And no, Sharpshooter's Oath isn't the play for Ganyu. The passive only applies to the first hit of Ganyu's charge attack, which is not a huge percentage of her DPS output. It's also got low 3-star stats, which hold it back from competing with Prototype Crescent. Sorry, Amber mains, Ganyu doesn't really work well with your 3-star weapon. Alright, so now let's discuss Ganyu's two main carry styles. There's Melt Shotganyu, which is the new highest DPS ceiling in the game, but has a lot of caveats. And there's Freeze Ganyu, which is still around the same single target power level of the Luke with Vaporize, but it also has freeze attached. We'll be going in depth with these in feature videos for each, but here's the basics. So Melt Shotganyu is by far the new highest DPS ceiling in the game. Basically, you run Xiangling as an off-field pyro support so that you can melt your charge attacks. We'll explain the full mechanics on why this works in the Melt Shotganyu video, but TLDR, any fresh pyro application is good for at least 2 melts. This makes Xiangling the ideal choice because both her Guaba and her ult apply pyro off-field, and each of these instances is good for both hits of Ganyu's charge attack to melt. However, this is a very close range comp, and that has its issues. It takes longer to charge up your shots than it takes most enemies to start and hit you with an attack. This means that you can get interrupted or have to dodge, and any charge time wasted is lost DPS. Yes, you can run a shield unit like Diona or Zhongli, but without massive investment, they don't eat too many hits. Also, the shield covers your crosshair, which kinda sucks. There's also the issue that the cryo application on your skills can eat pyro applications you want for your charge attack melts. The TLDR is that generally it's better to only charge attack for single target DPS while you do use your ult and your E in AoE situations. The final issue with Melt Shotganyu is that you want to run a Wandering Troop 4 set. This is obviously a nightmare to farm, and the difference between not having the Wandering Troop 2 and 4 set bonuses on Melt Shotganyu and having them is a pretty big gap. And standard artifact main stats, you want to run a Cryo Cup, a crit rate, or crit damage helm, leaning towards crit damage because of Ascension 1, but it does depend on your substats for crit rate, along with an attack percent Sans because she is a carry. There may be a place for an EM Sans with a Bennett in the team, but we are still looking into that. Now, the general Melt Shotganyu team is Bennett, Xiangling, Ganyu, and a 4th member of some sort, normally a Sucrose for EM sharing. You don't even necessarily need to run Bennett in this team, he's just very good with Xiangling, but there are a lot of variations that we will be discussing in the Melt Shotganyu video. However, in the meantime, I do recommend looking at the Kaching Main's Ganyu Early Thoughts documents. As always, link in the description. Now, the other playstyle is Freeze Ganyu. This is much more likely to be the playstyle most players will run. Again, full video also on Freeze Ganyu, but here's the TLDR. Calcs so far show that Freeze Ganyu teams deal around the same level of single target DPS as the Luke Vape teams, and they deal a lot more AoE DPS. Now, Freeze teams do need a Hydro support, and they do all have their own strengths and weaknesses. Barbara is of course the free-to-play option. However, she does basically deal negative damage, and her uptime is iffy because of a 36-second cooldown E, and you also have to play in Shotganyu range. Jingqiu, who interestingly enough is on banner right now, is your best uptime free support, but he's pretty much limited to single target. And his ult doesn't trigger on charge attacks for Ganyu, so you do have to learn how to do normal attack charge attack cancels. And on top of that, if you're not particularly quick with these cancels, it is possible for Jingqiu's Hydro to wear off from his ult swords before the bloom on Ganyu's charge attack hits. Unless, again, you play at Shotganyu range. Now, Mona does have AoE off-field Hydro application, but she is tied to a 12-second cooldown on her E, so her uptime is around 50% or so for freeze. Now, Child is, in our opinion, the worst option, but he does have some weird niches that we'll be exploring in the Freeze Ganyu video. Now, Jingqiu plus Mona is able to perma-freeze pretty nicely for Freeze Ganyu and does cover the weaknesses of running either solo, but it does require you dropping either Cryo Resonance or a Venera support, both of which are really nice for Freeze Ganyu, also Keck Hydro Resonance. Now, for freeze teams, you of course run the 4-piece Cryo set on Ganyu. This is much easier to farm than Wandering Troop 4, so that's nice, but it's still a 4 set you have to farm. Same main stats as before, attack percent Sans, Cryo Cup, although in this case you do 100% go with a crit damage helm because of the Cryo 4 set. And there is one more thing I do have to talk about when it comes to Ganyu's teams, which is why Venti is so good with Ganyu, and yes, I know, Venti makes any team he's in better. However, he makes any Ganyu team he's in even better. So first off, yes, Venti groups up enemies, which makes Ganyu's ult DPS spike massively. However, that is only the surface of why they have so much synergy. The real synergy between Ganyu and Venti is his ult's elemental infusions. A Hydro-infused Venti ult enables you to actually perma-freeze in AoE for Ganyu when mixed with other Hydro units. It's basically 8 seconds of AoE Hydro application for Ganyu to abuse that also sucks enemies into it. And a Pyro-infused Venti ult gives you an 8-second window for Ganyu to melt her charge attacks. This means more melts, but also it's your only real source of ranged melts on Ganyu, which solves a lot of Shotganyu problems. Now, Venti's ult doesn't 100% of the time melt both hits of Ganyu's charge attacks. We'll discuss the nuances and how exactly it works in the melt video. Oh, and a Cryo-infused Venti ult plus a Ganyu ult can actually act as a melt enabler for Pyro carries. Now, it does have some issues with consistency as well as just being kind of a small window of melt enabling, but we'll be discussing this all in depth in the future video about support Ganyu's issues and her niches. And of course, Venti's massive crowd control just makes it easier not to have your charge attacks interrupted as Ganyu. Sucrose can theoretically replace Venti in some of these synergies. We do need to do more testing though, because at least initially, she just doesn't seem to apply her infused element nearly nearly as quickly, which leads to consistency issues. But yeah, Venti is OP. Venti is really OP with Ganyu. So if Ganyu is the new strongest carry in the game, is great for free-to-play weapons and teams, and deals as much DPS as Luke Vape when she's running a freeze team, why am I not going to tell everyone that they should pull for her? That's because her higher carry DPS output comes at a cost. Ganyu is the highest skill floor unit in the entire game. First off, you have to be willing to charge attack carry. Again, in our opinion, Ganyu is not worth a pull if you just want a cryo support. Ganyu's potential lies in her being a charge attack carry for cryo teams, and it is much stronger than her support power. This requires you to be willing to aim. For a lot of mobile players, this is probably a deal breaker. Hell, for Tuner, this is a deal breaker because he's an FPS veteran, and for some f***ing reason, the vertical sensitivity in this game is locked at 50%. As someone who plays quite a decent amount of first-person shooters, I can tell you this feels like garbage. Fortunately, you don't have to aim for headshots only on Ganyu. A guaranteed crit on the first hit of your charge attack isn't that huge of a deal. However, if you don't have an ammo spo, you're probably going to be running Prototype Crescent, which means at the bare minimum, you need to be landing a headshot every 10 seconds. And of course, the AoE on the Bloom is pretty big, so you can remedy bad aim by aiming at enemies' feet, so if you do miss, you'll still at least hit the Bloom damage. Now, while this does help, any missed shots is still lost DPS. It is, of course, much easier to hit frozen enemies, but the reality is you can miss shots. Diluc doesn't miss shots, excluding Systemfly Fury, and doesn't lose charge up times when he has to dodge or gets hit because he just keeps going with his combos afterwards. Diluc's damage ceiling is accessible because he is the definition of an Unga Bunga low skill floor carry. Ganyu is not. Additionally, you're heavily encouraged to learn how to aim cancel on Ganyu. And yes, we will have a video about that, but you do get anywhere from a 10 to 20% DPS increase on a charge attack spam if you learn how to aim cancel well, and it's pretty much a requirement if you want to run her with Jingcho. Also, unlike other units, Ganyu is much more dependent on full force set artifacts because she has such insane synergy with them. Other units can get away with offsets, Ganyu really doesn't. And I'm still farming a 5-star crit damage cryo set helmet for her. And remember how I said Ganyu is a good unit to hyperinvest into? You also kinda gotta. Her teams don't have to be selfish, but are much better when Ganyu is being as selfish as reasonable because her charge attack spam does a lot of damage. This makes her incredibly mediocre as a cheaper investment unit. If you're running Ganyu, you want her to be stacked. However, none of these are insurmountable, nor are they necessarily deal breakers. They're just things I feel like you need to be aware of if you want to pull for Ganyu. She increases the damage ceiling of carries and teams in the game, but that damage ceiling is not universally accessible. You do have to be willing to play with caveats and play with a higher level of skill to access that power level. And that is a good thing. The problem with Diluc, Venti, and Bennett, in our opinion, is that their value ceiling is accessible to almost every single player. They are incredibly easy to use mechanically for incredibly high value. Ganyu is not that. She is factually the hardest to play character they've ever put into Genshin, but her DPS ceiling as a charge attack carry more than makes up for it. If your Ganyu is well invested, if you don't miss too many shots, and if you don't get your shots interrupted, then Ganyu is the single strongest carry in the game to date, who is also great with free-to-play supports. With a freeze team that stops enemies from moving, and with melt teams that is much harder to play well, but oh boy, them some big numbers. Now, I was no-lifing Valorant when Genshin came out, so I can say that aiming in this game isn't super hard by comparison. I'm not saying that she is insanely difficult to play or anything, but she does have the highest skill requirement out of any single character in this game, which is why I don't consider it a bad thing that she deals as much damage as she does, because she just requires more skill input, but she rewards you for it. Alright, that is it for this initial Ganyu video. We are going to be doing quite a bit more content on her, talking about her freeze comps, her melt comps, her support power and issues, as well as animation cancels, and basically I'm going to be working on Ganyu videos until the next banner comes out. Thank you as always for checking out the video. If you enjoyed it, be sure to like it, leave a comment below, share it with your friends. All of these things are the best way to help support the channel completely for free. Don't forget, Tuner does stream almost every single day over at twitch.tv/Tuner, and again, a huge thanks to him for helping me cut down this 14-page script down to about 6 pages or so, which is a lot more reasonable. He the best. Also, he is live over at Twitch right now. I will be hanging out with him in voice chat for a little bit as well, so be sure to come hang out. We do also have our Twitters. The @JinxMathLess is my personal account where I post things I'm working on, updates about various stuff, or just random memes. And the @JinxTuner is the company account run by Tuner. That one is more for professional business inquiries, updates about the YouTube channel or the Twitch channel, all that kind of more professional business stuff. We do, of course, have our Discord server, the Mathless Nest. Be sure to come hang out if you want to meet some like-minded individuals who just enjoy learning about Genshin, sharing information, all that good stuff. And of course, none of this would be possible without the generosity of our patrons. You know I say this every video, but I will be saying it every video. Y'all the best. And a huge thank you to a massive list of all the theory crafters I have been talking to over the past week. I honestly don't even know where to start with a list for it, and I will be thanking even more of y'all in the upcoming videos as I share even more resources. But regardless, thank you all so much for all of the help from everyone at Kaching mains, Child mains, and Ganyu mains that I've been discussing with. In particular, in this video, thank you to Errol for the testing on the Hyperinvestment Ganyu free-to-play team, and also a huge thank you to every single theory crafter and tester involved with making the Kaching mains Ganyu's early thoughts documents. So thank you to Artesians, Illidan Naga, Limits, Striss, Karzak, Zakharov, Daybreak, Bish, Errol again, Michael M. Su, Bo Brokrot, Bosick, and Zanto. And also a thank you to Robin, Zakharov, and Tenten, who I did have various discussions with about the DPS calculations for Ganyu as well as her teams. We will be looking a lot more deeply at the numbers that they have crunched in the respective Melt and Freeze videos. And of course, as always, anything referenced in the video will be linked in the description. Alright, that's it for the really long credits. As always, be sure to subscribe, hit a notification bell if you want to see new videos as they come out, because there are going to be a lot of Ganyu videos. Happy waifu hunting, whalers. We'll see you in the next one. Bye!